It should limit the thinkable and thereby the unthinkable. It should limit the unthinkable from within through the thinkable. It will mean the unspeakable by clearly displaying the speakable. Everything that can be thought at all can be thought clearly. Everything that can be said clearly. Propositions can represent the whole of reality, but they cannot represent what they must have in common with reality in order to be able to represent it, the logical form. To be able to represent the logical form, we should have to be able to put ourselves with the propositions outside logic, that is, outside the world. Propositions cannot represent the logical form. This mirrors itself in the propositions. That which mirrors itself in language, language cannot represent. That which expresses itself in language, we cannot express by language. The propositions show the logical form of reality. They exhibit it. Thus, a proposition FA shows that in its sense the object A occurs. Two propositions FA and GA that they are both about the same object. If two propositions contradict one another, this is shown by their structure. Similarly, if one follows from another, and so on. What can be shown cannot be said. Now we understand our feeling that we are in possession of the right logical conception, if only all is right in our symbolism. We can speak in a certain sense of formal properties of objects and atomic facts, or of properties of the structure of facts, and in the same sense of formal relations and relations of structures. Instead of property of structure, I also say internal property. Instead of relation of structures, internal relation. I introduce these expressions in order to show the reason for the confusion, very widespread among philosophers, between internal relations and proper external relations. The holding of such internal properties and relations cannot, however, be asserted by propositions, but it shows itself in the propositions, which present the atomic facts and treat of the objects in question. An internal property of a fact we also call a feature of this fact, in the sense in which we speak of facial features. A property is internal if it is unthinkable that its object does not possess it. This blue color and that stand in the internal relation of brighter and darker, io ipso. It is unthinkable that these two objects should not stand in this relation. Here, to the shifting use of the words property and relation, there corresponds the shifting use of the word object. The existence of an internal property of a possible state of affairs is not expressed by a proposition, but it expresses itself in the proposition which presents that state of affairs by an internal property of this proposition. It would be as senseless to ascribe a formal property to a proposition as to deny it the formal property. One cannot distinguish forms from one another by saying that one has this property but the other that. For this assumes that there is a sense in asserting either property of either form. The existence of an internal relation between possible states of affairs expresses itself in language by an internal relation between the propositions presenting them. Here the disputed question whether all relations are internal or external disappears. Series which are ordered by internal relations I call formal series. The series of numbers is ordered not by an external but by an internal relation. Similarly, the series of propositions A R B. There exists X, A R X, X R B. There exists XY, A R X, A R Y, Y R B, and so on. If B stands in one of these relations to A, I call B a successor of A. In the sense in which we speak of formal properties, we can now speak also of formal concepts. I introduce this expression in order to make clear the confusion of formal concepts with proper concepts, which runs through the whole of the old logic. That anything falls under a formal concept as an object belonging to it cannot be expressed by a proposition. But it shows itself in the sign of this object itself. The name shows that it signifies an object, the numerical sign that it signifies a number, and so on. Formal concepts cannot, like proper concepts, be presented by a function. For their characteristics, the formal properties are not expressed by the functions. The expression of a formal property is a feature of a certain symbols. The sign that signifies the characteristics of a formal concept is, therefore, a characteristic feature of all symbols whose meanings fall under the concept. The expression of the formal concept is therefore a propositional variable in which only this characteristic feature is constant. The propositional variable signifies the formal concept, and its values signify the objects which fall under this concept. Every variable is the sign of a formal concept. For every variable presents a constant form which all its values possess and which can be conceived as a formal property of these values. So the variable name x is the proper sign of the pseudo-concept object. Wherever the word object, thing, entity, and so on is rightly used, it is expressed in logical symbolism by the variable name. For example, in the proposition there are two objects which, by there exists xy, wherever it is used otherwise, i.e. as a proper concept word, there arises senseless pseudo-propositions. So one cannot say, for example, there are objects as one says there are books, nor there are 100 objects as there are aleph not objects. And it is senseless to speak of the number of all objects. The same holds for the words complex, fact, function, number, and so on. They all signify formal concepts and are presented in logical symbolism by variables, not by functions or classes, as Frege and Russell thought. Expressions like one is a number, there is only one number not, and all like them are senseless.